The ship shuddered violently as another explosion ripped through its hull. Alarms blared, and red warning lights flashed across the cockpit. Alex Carter gripped the edge of his seat tightly, his knuckles turning white. He had been in dangerous situations before, but nothing like this. The small transport vessel was spinning out of control, caught in the gravitational pull of an uncharted planet. Outside the cracked viewport, streaks of orange and purple filled the sky as they hurtled toward the surface. "Mayday! Mayday!" came the frantic voice of Lieutenant Olivia Grant over the comms. "All units, brace for impact." Alex didn't have time to respond. The ship lurched again, tossing him against the wall. His head hit something hard, and a sharp pain shot through his skull. For a moment, everything went blurry. Then, with a deafening crash, the ship slammed into the ground, throwing Alex forward. The world around him turned blacked out when he woke up. It was quiet, too quiet. The alarms had stopped, and the only sound was the faint hiss of escaping air. Groaning, Alex pushed himself upright. His body ached all over, but he forced himself to move. The cockpit was a mess of twisted metal and broken instruments. Through the shattered viewport, he could see dense jungle stretching out in every direction. Thick vines hung from towering trees, their leaves glowing faintly under the dim light of two suns. He fumbled for his helmet and secured it, checking the oxygen levels. Enough to last a few hours, maybe more if he conserved it carefully. Reaching for his sidearm, he checked the magazine. Fully loaded. Not that it would do much good against whatever might be lurking out there. Still, having it gave him some comfort. Grant? Anyone? Alex tried the comms, but all he got was static. Either the others were too far away, or worse, they hadn't survived the crash. Shaking off the thought, he grabbed his survival pack and stepped out of the wreckage. The air outside smelled strange, earthy, yet metallic. It wasn't breathable, so he kept his helmet on. As he surveyed the area, he noticed how alien everything looked. Plants with translucent leaves shimmered in the sunlight, while strange creatures scuttled between the roots. Some resembled insects, but larger, with iridescent shells that glinted like jewels. Others were unlike anything he'd ever seen. There, forms shifting and writhing as though alive with energy. Alex took a deep breath, or as deep as the helmet allowed, and began moving. Staying near the crash site was pointless. No one was coming for him anytime soon. He needed to find shelter, water, and hopefully a way to signal for help. But first, he had to figure out where he was going. After walking for what felt like hours, Alex stumbled upon something unexpected: ruins. They rose from the jungle floor like ancient bones, covered in moss and tangled vines. Strange symbols were carved into the stone, swirling patterns that seemed to pulse faintly when he looked at them too long. Whatever civilization had built this place, it was long gone now. Or so he thought. As he examined the carvings, a sound caught his attention, a soft whimper, almost like a cry for help. Cautiously, Alex drew his weapon and followed the noise. Pushing aside a curtain of vines, he froze. Lying on the ground was a creature, injured and struggling to breathe. It was unlike any animal he'd encountered before. Its body was sleek and segmented, with 6 limbs and a tail that curled weakly behind it. Its skin or exoskeleton was a deep blue, marked with intricate patterns that matched the ones on the ruins. For a moment, Alex hesitated. This thing could be dangerous. But then he noticed a wound on its side, oozing a greenish fluid. It wasn't attacking, it was dying. Lowering his gun, Alex knelt beside it. Up close, the creature's eyes were wide with fear and pain. Against all logic, he opened his survival pack and pulled out his medkit. He didn't know why he was doing it. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was because the creature reminded him of the stray dogs he used to take care of back home. Whatever the reason, he couldn't just walk away. Using a sterilized patch, he cleaned the wound as best he could, then applied a sealant to stop the bleeding. The creature flinched but didn't resist. Once he was done, Alex left some nutrient bars nearby. He wasn't sure if it could eat them. but it was worth a try. Then, backing away slowly, he hid behind a tree to watch. Minutes passed, and the creature's breathing steadied. Slowly, it stood, testing its weight on shaky legs. It glanced toward the food, sniffed it cautiously, and ate. Satisfied, Alex slipped further into the jungle, leaving the creature to recover. That night, as he sat by a makeshift fire, Alex found himself thinking about what he'd done. Helping that thing had been reckless, especially since he didn't even know what it was, but something about it felt right. In a place as alien and hostile as this, even the smallest act of kindness mattered. Little did he know that decision would change everything for better or worse. The Wanderer tore through space, its engines pushing to their limits as Ethan and his crew raced toward the Nexus. The consortium ships were already there, their weapons trained on the crystalline structure that pulsed with light in the heart of the barren planet. From the cockpit, Ethan could see the destruction they had caused. Craters scarred the ground, and the air shimmered with residual energy from their attacks. But the Nexus stood strong, untouched by their efforts. There, trying to break it, Clara said grimly, her hands flying over the console as she monitored the sensors. But it's holding. Ethan clenched the controls tighter, his jaw set. Not for long if we don't stop them. The plan was simple, or at least as simple as it could be given the circumstances. Using the upgrades Clara had installed, they would distract the consortium ships while Ethan made his way to the Nexus. Once there, he would use what little knowledge Lila had shared with him to activate the artifact's full potential. It wasn't much of a strategy, but it was all they had. Ready? Ethan asked, glancing back at Clara and the others. They nodded silently, determination etched on their faces. None of them had known Lila personally, but they had heard her story. They understood what was at stake. Let's do this, Clara said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air dot as the Wanderer approached the planet. The consortium ships turned their attention to the newcomer. Plasma fire erupted around them, shaking the ship violently. Ethan gritted his teeth, steering the Wanderer into a tight spiral to avoid the blast. Meanwhile, Clara activated the prototype shielding, which flared brightly as it absorbed the impacts. "We've got their attention," she shouted over the noise. "Now what? Hold them off," Ethan replied, his focus shifting to the next phase of the plan. He guided the ship closer to the surface, scanning for a safe landing spot near the Nexus. The ground was uneven and littered with debris, but he found a patch of flat terrain just within reach. "Here goes nothing," Ethan muttered as he brought the Wanderer down hard. The landing jolted everyone inside, but no one complained. There was no time for that dot grabbing a small pack filled with tools and supplies. Ethan climbed out of the ship. Behind him, Clara and the others kept the consortium forces busy, firing back with everything they had. The sound of explosions echoed across the landscape, mixing with the hum of the Nexus. Ethan ran toward the artifact, his boots kicking up clouds of dust. As he drew closer, the light emanating from the Nexus grew brighter, washing over him like a warm tide. For a moment, he felt Lila's presence again, not physically, but in the way the energy seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. It was comforting, even amidst the chaos. When he reached the base of the Nexus, Ethan stopped and placed his hand against its smooth surface. Memories flooded his mind, Lila teaching him how to channel energy, her glowing smile, the trust in her eyes when she told him they were together. Tears welled up, but he blinked them away. He didn't have time for grief. Not yet. Focusing on what Lila had shown him, Ethan began to channel his thoughts into the Nexus. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly, the crystal began to respond. Its light grew brighter, spreading outward in waves that bathed the entire planet in warmth. Plants sprouted faster, water flowed more freely, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with life. But Ethan knew this wasn't enough. The Nexus was powerful, but it needed direction. Drawing on every ounce of strength he had left, Ethan poured his emotions into the artifact, his pain, his hope, his determination. The Nexus roared to life, its light intensifying until it became almost blinding above. the battle raged on. The consortium ships fired relentlessly at the Wanderer, but Clara's shields held firm. She and the others fought fiercely, determined to protect Ethan while he completed his task. Smoke filled the cockpit, and alarms blared as systems began to fail, but none of them gave up. Then, something incredible happened. A wave of energy surged outward from the Nexus, engulfing the planet and the ships above it. The consortium vessels froze mid-attack, their systems overloaded by the sudden influx of power. One by one, they drifted lifelessly away, their crews. Unconscious or incapacitated, Clara stared in awe as the threat vanished before her eyes. "It worked," she whispered, slumping back in her seat. He actually did it. Back at the Nexus, Ethan collapsed to his knees, completely drained. The artifact's light dimmed slightly, settling to a steady glow that illuminated the transformed landscape. Around him, the once barren planet was now teeming with life-lush greenery, flowing rivers, and even birds taking flight for the first time in centuries. Ethan looked up at the Nexus, tears streaming down his face. "You did it, Lila," he said softly. "You saved us all." Through the haze of exhaustion, he felt a faint warmth in his mind, a final message from Lila. "We did it," her voice echoed. Together. In the days that followed, news of the Nexus spread across the galaxy. Stories of its power traveled faster than any starship, inspiring hope among billions. Planets ravaged by war and neglect began to heal, their ecosystems restored by the same energy that had transformed the barren world where the artifact stood. Civilizations came together, united by the realization that survival depended on cooperation. Rather than greed, Ethan returned to Earth, not as a hero seeking recognition, but as someone humbled by the vastness of the universe. He sold the Wanderer and settled into a quiet life, working odd jobs and keeping mostly to himself. But he never forgot Lila or the lessons she had taught him about courage, sacrifice, and the interconnectedness of all things. Occasionally, people would ask about his adventures. Some wanted to know the truth behind the Nexus. Others sought advice on how to harness its power for their own gain. Ethan always gave the same answer. The Nexus isn't mine to control. It belongs to everyone and no one. Years later, when he finally passed away, his legacy lived on. Across the galaxy, countless lives had been changed because of what he and Lila had done. The Nexus continued to shine, a reminder that even in the darkest corners of space, hope could still prevail. And though Ethan was gone, those who remembered him spoke of him not as a scavenger or a soldier, but as a man who had carried the weight of the universe on his shoulders and emerged stronger for it. Together, he and Lila had proven that compassion and unity could overcome even the greatest odds. They had amazed the galaxy, not with weapons or wealth, but with the simplest and most powerful force of all, love. Ethan knelt on the ground, his hands trembling as he stared at the empty space where Lila had been just moments before. The Nexus towered above him, its crystalline surface shimmering with an inner light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Around him, the barren planet was transforming life, returning to the cracked soil. Streams of water flowing through newly formed channels, and even small plants beginning to sprout. It was beautiful, but Ethan couldn't bring himself to feel anything other than grief. Lila was gone. She had given everything her energy, her life to activate the Nexus. And though her sacrifice had brought this miracle, it didn't ease the ache in his chest. He had promised to protect her, to help her survive. Instead, he had watched her fade away right in front of him. "She trusted me," Ethan muttered, his voice barely audible over the soft hum of the Nexus. "And I failed her." But deep down, he knew that wasn't true. Lila had made her choice. Willingly, knowing what it would cost her. She hadn't asked for pity or regret, only understanding. Through their connection, she had shown him why this mattered, not just for her people, but for everyone. The Nexus wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a beacon of hope for the future. Still sitting there alone on that alien world, Ethan felt hollow. He had never felt so powerless in his entire life. Hours passed, though it was hard to tell time under the dim glow of the dying star overhead. Eventually, Ethan forced himself to stand. His legs wobbled beneath him, and his head throbbed from the strain of channeling Lila's energy into the Nexus, but he couldn't stay here forever. The Consortium was still out there, hunting for the artifact. If they found it now, all of Lila's efforts would be wasted. Dragging himself back to the Wanderer, Ethan began preparing the ship for departure. Every movement felt heavy, as if the weight of the galaxy itself was pressing down on him. But he pushed through it, focusing on one task at a time. First, he checked the engines, making sure they were ready to fly. Then he secured the supplies, ensuring nothing would shift during takeoff. Finally, he climbed into the pilot's seat. Gripping the controls tightly as the Wanderer lifted off the ground, Ethan glanced back at the Nexus one last time. Its light stretched across the horizon, bathing the planet in warmth and color. For a moment, he imagined he could hear Lila's voice, a soft, melodic whisper carried by the wind. "You did well," she seemed to say. "Now finish what we started." Ethan swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "I'll try," he whispered. Then, with a deep breath, he turned the ship toward open space and set a course away from the planet. The journey back wasn't easy. The Consortium ships were still scattered throughout the sector, searching relentlessly for any sign of the fugitives. Ethan avoided them as best he could, using every trick Lila had taught him to mask the Wanderer's presence. But each encounter left him more drained than the last. Without Lila's energy to bolster him, he was running on fumes, both physically and emotionally. One night, as he drifted through the void, Ethan allowed himself to reflect on everything that had happened. From the moment he found Lila bleeding out on that desolate moon, his life had changed in ways he never thought possible. She had shown him courage, strength, and selflessness, qualities he hadn't realized he possessed until she brought them out in him. Even now, without her by his side, he could feel her influence guiding him forward. But guilt lingered too. He kept replaying their final moments together, wondering if there was anything he could have done differently. Could he have saved her? Could he have found another way? "No," Ethan said aloud, shaking his head. "She made her choice, and she believed in me." That thought gave him a sliver of peace. Whatever came next, he owed it to Lila to keep going. To honor her memory by finishing what they had started. It took several days, but eventually, Ethan reached a safe zone, a remote corner of space known for its neutrality. Here, traders, smugglers, and refugees gathered, exchanging goods and information far from the reach of organizations like the Consortium. It wasn't exactly home, but it was close enough for now. Ethan docked the Wanderer at a small station and stepped outside, breathing in the stale air of the crowded hub. People bustled around him, shouting prices, haggling over deals, and sharing stories. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of normalcy, even if it was fleeting. He wandered through the station, listening to snippets of conversation. Most of it was meaningless chatter, rumors about lucrative trades or dangerous missions, but one story caught his attention. A group of miners claimed to have seen strange lights emanating from a distant planet, accompanied by reports of sudden growth and revitalization. The description matched the effects of the Nexus perfectly. Word was spreading. Ethan smiled faintly, feeling a flicker of pride. Lila's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. The Nexus was already changing things, bringing life and hope to places long thought dead. And as more people learned about it, the harder it would be for the Consortium to destroy it. But Ethan knew the fight wasn't over. The Consortium wouldn't give up easily. They would come for the Nexus sooner or later, and when they did, someone needed to be ready to stop them. Over the next few days, Ethan began gathering allies. He shared Lila's story with anyone who would listen, not just the details, but the meaning behind it. He told them about the Valeth, their mission, and the power of the Nexus. Some dismissed him as crazy, but others listened intently, moved by his words. Among those who believed him was a young engineer named Clara. She had been working on experimental shield technology designed to protect ships from high-energy attacks. When Ethan explained what the Nexus could do and how important it was to protect it, she offered her help without hesitation. "I've always wanted to make a difference," Clara said, adjusting her goggles. "If this is my chance, then count me in." With Clara's expertise and a few other volunteers, Ethan began retrofitting the Wanderer with advanced defenses. They added reinforced plating, upgraded weapon systems, and Clara's prototype shielding. By the time they finished, the ship was nearly unrecognizable, but it was ready for whatever came next. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan grew stronger. The grief didn't disappear, it never would, but it became manageable. He carried Lila's memory with him everywhere he went, drawing strength from her example. Whenever doubt crept in, he reminded himself of her words, "We are together." Finally, the day came when Ethan received word that the consortium had discovered the Nexus. Their forces were converging on the planet, determined to claim the artifact for themselves. Ethan knew it was time to act. Standing in the cockpit of the Wanderer, surrounded by his new crew, Ethan took a deep breath. His hands gripped the controls tightly, and his eyes locked onto the coordinates of the Nexus. "Let's finish this," he said firmly. The engines roared to life, propelling the ship forward. Ahead of them lay danger, uncertainty, and possibly death. But Ethan didn't care. He had a promise to keep, one he intended to honor no matter the cost. For Lila, for the galaxy, for everyone who deserved a better future. And so, the Wanderer sped into the unknown, carrying hope within its battered hull. The cave was quiet, save for the soft hum of the Wanderer's systems and the occasional drip of water echoing through the rocky tunnels. Ethan sat cross-legged on the ground, staring at the faint glow of Lila's veins as she rested against the ship's hull. She had fallen into a deep sleep, her body trying to recover from the strain of their escape. But even in her slumber, her energy pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat tied to the rhythm of the universe itself. Ethan couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of what Lila had shown him, the Valith, their world burning, the Nexus. It was too much to process all at once. He wasn't a hero or a scientist or anyone important. He was just a scavenger who happened to stumble across something far bigger than himself. And yet, here he was, holding the fate of an entire species, and maybe the galaxy in his hands. Glanced at Lila again, feeling a mix of awe and guilt. She trusted him completely, even though she barely knew him. And now, because of that trust, she was putting her life in his hands. The weight of it pressed down on him, heavier than any physical burden ever could. "What do I do?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. "How am I supposed to protect you?" As if sensing his thoughts, Lila stirred slightly, her glowing eyes open, meeting his with a calm intensity that made Ethan feel both small and significant at the same time. She reached out, placing her hand over his. Warmth spread through his fingers, followed by a flood of images and emotion. Strength, courage, unity. "You're not alone," Ethan heard in his mind, though Lila hadn't spoken aloud. "We are together." The words were simple, but they carried a power that shook Ethan to his core. For the first time since this nightmare began, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he didn't have to face this alone. Maybe they could figure it out together. The next morning, Ethan decided it was time to act. Hiding in the cave wasn't a long-term solution. Sooner or later, the consortium would find him, and when they did, they'd be ready. But until then, they needed to prepare not just defensively, but offensively. Lila was still weak, but she insisted on helping. Using what little energy she had left, she taught Ethan how to harness some of her abilities. At first, it was clumsy and frustrating. Ethan struggled to focus, his human mind unused to the strange sensations coursing through him. But slowly, he began to understand. He learned how to create small bursts of light, how to shield himself from harm, how to sense the presence of others nearby. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to give them an edge. "You're learning quickly," Lila said through their mental link, pride radiating from her. Ethan smiled faintly, though he couldn't shake the worry gnawing at him. Every lesson drained Lila further, and he hated seeing her suffer for his sake. "We need to keep moving," Ethan said one evening as they reviewed their supplies. "This place won't hold forever." Lila nodded in agreement. Through their connection, she sent him coordinates, a remote sector of space where the Nexus was hidden. It was dangerous, guarded by ancient traps designed to keep intruders away, but it was also their only chance. If they could reach the Nexus before the Consortium, they might stand a fighting chance. The journey was perilous. The Consortium had doubled their efforts, deploying smaller scout ships to comb the area for signs of the fugitives. Ethan and Lila narrowly avoided detection several times, relying on Lila's fading energy to mask their presence. Each close call left them more exhausted than the last, but they kept going, driven by sheer determination. One night, as they drifted through the void, Ethan noticed something strange on the sensors. A cluster of ships, moving erratically near a massive asteroid field. They weren't Consortium vessels, they were pirates. Known for their ruthlessness, these raiders attacked anything that crossed their path, stealing whatever they could carry. "We can't fight them," Ethan said grimly, adjusting the ship's course. "Not like this." But the pirates spotted them anyway. Their lead ship hailed the Wanderer, demanding surrender. Ethan ignored the transmission, pushing the engines to their limit as they tried to slip past. The pirates gave chase, firing wildly. Lila grabbed Ethan's arm, her touch sending a surge of energy through him. "Together," she said silently. Ethan nodded, focusing on the lesson she had taught him. As the pirate ships closed in, he unleashed a burst of energy, creating a blinding flash of light that disoriented their pursuers. The distraction gave them just enough time to weave through the asteroid field and escape. When they finally emerged on the other side, Ethan collapsed into the pilot's seat, breathing heavily. His head throbbed from the effort, and his hands trembled. But they had made it. Against all odds, they had survived. Days turned into weeks as they drew closer to the Nexus. Along the way, Layla grew weaker, her glowing veins dimming to almost nothing. Ethan begged her to stop using her energy, but she refused. "We must finish this," she told him through their link. "For my people, for everyone." Finally, they arrived at the destination Lila had shown him. It was a barren planet orbiting a dying star, its surface cracked and lifeless. In the center of a vast crater stood the Nexus, a towering crystalline structure that pulsed with an inner light so bright it hurt to look at directly. Ethan landed the Wanderer nearby, his heart pounding as they approached the artifact. Layla walked beside him, her steps slow but steady. She placed her hand on the smooth surface of the Nexus, and it responded immediately, glowing brighter as it recognized her. "This is it," Ethan said softly. "What happens now?" Lila turned. To him, her expression filled with both sadness and resolve. Through their connection, he felt her explain. Activating the Nexus required her to channel all of her remaining energy into it. Once started, the process couldn't be stopped, and it would likely kill her. "No," Ethan said firmly, shaking his head. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Lila replied silently. "This is my purpose, my choice." Ethan wanted to argue, to tell her she didn't have to sacrifice herself, but deep down, he knew she was right. This was why she had been chosen, why she had survived everything the galaxy had thrown at her. Still, he couldn't let her face this alone. "I'll help you," he said, gripping her hand tightly. "Whatever it takes, we'll do it together." Lila hesitated, then nodded. Together, they stepped closer to the Nexus, their minds merging as one. Ethan focused on the energy flowing between them, guiding it toward the artifact. The Nexus roared to life, its light spreading outward in waves that bathed the planet in warmth and color. As the process continued, Ethan felt Lila's strength fading. Her body grew lighter, almost translucent, as her energy poured into the Nexus. Tears streamed down his face as he held onto her, refusing to let go. "Thank you," she whispered in his mind, her voice soft but full of love. "You've given me hope." And then she was gone. The Nexus stood complete, its light shining across the galaxy. Ethan fell to his knees, overwhelmed by grief and exhaustion. But as he looked up, he saw something incredible. The Nexus was healing the planet. Around them, bringing life back to the barren wasteland. Plants sprouted from the cracks in the ground, and streams of water flowed freely. In that moment, Ethan realized Lila's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. She had saved more than just her people. She had saved the galaxy itself. And though she was gone, her legacy would live on forever. The Wanderer sped through the darkness of space, its engine straining as Ethan pushed the ship to its limits. Behind them, the Consortium forces were still chasing, their larger vessel cutting through the void like a predator stalking its prey. The outpost was gone, now destroyed, and Mia's fate remained unknown. Ethan tried not to think about it too much. He needed to focus. If he let his emotions take over, they wouldn't survive. Lila sat quietly in the co-pilot's seat, her glowing veins flickering faintly with every jolt of the ship. She wasn't speaking, not that she could, but her presence was enough. Every so often she would reach out with her mind, sending small waves of reassurance or warning. It was strange how natural it felt now, this silent form of communication between them. At first, it had been unsettling, but now it was almost comforting. Ethan could feel her determination, her will to keep going no matter what. "We can't outrun them forever," Ethan muttered, glancing at the sensors. The Consortium ship was gaining ground, its weapons charging for another attack. "We need an edge." Something they don't expect. Lila turned to look at him, her eyes filled with understanding. Slowly, she raised her hand and placed it on the console. A soft hum filled the air as streams of light flowed from her fingertips, weaving into the ship's systems. The Wanderer shuddered briefly before stabilizing, its controls glowing brighter than before. "What did you do?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with awe. Lila didn't answer directly, but Ethan felt the message in his mind. Power, shielding. She was using her energy to enhance the ship, giving it capabilities it never had before. It was risky. Ethan could see the strain on her face, but it might be their only chance. "Okay," Ethan said, gripping the controls tightly. "Let's see if this works." He swung the Wanderer sharply to the left, dodging a barrage of plasma fire from the Consortium ship. The enhanced shields flared brightly as they absorbed the impact, holding steady where they would have failed. Before, encouraged, Ethan pushed the ship harder, zigzagging through debris fields and asteroid clusters in an attempt to lose their pursuers. For a while, it seemed to work. The Consortium ship struggled to keep up, its bulkier frame unable to navigate the tight spaces as easily. But Ethan knew it was only a temporary solution. Sooner or later, they'd find themselves cornered again. "We need a plan," Ethan said aloud, more to himself than to Lila. "Somewhere to hide. Somewhere they won't follow." Lila tilted her head slightly, her glowing eyes narrowing in thought. Then, without warning, she reached out and touched his temple lightly. Images flooded Ethan's mind visions of a distant star system, a network of caves hidden beneath the surface of a barren planet. It wasn't much, but it was shelter, and right now, that was all they needed. "Got it," Ethan said, adjusting the ship's course. "Hold on." The journey took hours, during which Lila grew weaker. Her energy was fading fast, and Ethan could see the toll it was taking on her. But she refused to rest, insisting through their mental link that she continue helping until they were safe. Ethan admired her strength, even as guilt gnawed at him for letting her sacrifice so much. When they finally arrived at the planet Lila had shown him, Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. It was desolate and unremarkable, exactly the kind of place the Consortium wouldn't bother searching. He guided the Wanderer into one of the underground caves, landing softly on the rocky terrain below. Outside, the air was thin and cold, but It would have to do. As soon as the engines powered down, Lila slumped back in her seat, exhausted. Ethan rushed to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did great," he said softly. "We're safe for now." She managed to faint. Smile, her glowing veins dimming further. Ethan knew she needed rest, but there was no time for that yet. They had to prepare in case the consortium found them anyway. Over the next few hours, Ethan worked tirelessly to fortify their position. Using tools salvaged from the Wanderer, he set up traps and alarms around the cave entrance. Lila helped, as best she could, using her remaining energy to create makeshift barriers of light that would alert them to intruders. By the time they finished, the cave felt like a fortress, or at least as close to one as they could manage. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of options. Lila was growing weaker by the minute, and he didn't know how much longer she could keep going. More importantly, he didn't know why the consortium wanted her so badly. What made her so special? And why were they willing to destroy everything in their path to get her? That night, as they sat together in the dim glow of the cave, Ethan decided to ask. "Why are they after you?" he said softly. "What do they want?" Lila hesitated, her glowing eyes clouding with sadness. For a moment, Ethan thought she wouldn't answer. Then slowly she began to send images into his mind, fragments of memories that pieced together a story far greater than he'd imagined. She showed him her people, the Valith, a race of energy-based beings who had once thrived across the galaxy. They were peaceful, wise, and incredibly powerful, capable of manipulating matter and energy on a molecular level. But their abilities had made them targets. Other civilizations, greedy for power, had hunted them to near extinction. Now, only a handful remained, scattered and hiding. Lila herself was part of a desperate mission to preserve her people's knowledge before it was lost forever. Hidden within her consciousness was a map leading to the Nexus, an ancient artifact said to hold the secrets of creation itself. The consortium wanted the Nexus, and they believed Lila was the key to finding it. Ethan listened in stunned silence, his mind racing. "So that's why they're after you," he said finally. "They think you'll lead them to this Nexus." Lila nodded, her expression grim. She reached out and touched his hand, sending another wave of thoughts. "It's dangerous. Too dangerous. I don't care," Ethan said firmly. "I'm not letting them take you. We'll figure this out together." Lila's glowing veins brightened slightly, and Ethan felt a surge of gratitude flow through their connection. For the first time since meeting her, he realized just how much she trusted him. And that trust meant everything. As they settled in for the night, Ethan kept watch, his eyes scanning the shadows outside the cave. He knew the consortium wouldn't give up easily, but for now they were safe. And as long as he had Lila by his side, he believed they could face whatever came next. In the quiet moments that followed, Ethan allowed himself to reflect on how far they'd come. Just days ago, he'd been a simple scavenger, wandering the edges of space with no real purpose. Now, he was caught up in something far bigger than himself, something that could change the galaxy forever. Whether that change would be for better or worse, he didn't know. But one thing was certain. He wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. Ethan knew they couldn't stay hidden forever. The consortium ship might have moved on for now, but it wouldn't take long for them to widen their search. Every second they wasted meant another chance for the hunters to catch up. He glanced at Lila, who was still pale and weak, her glowing veins dimmer than before. She needed rest, food, something to replenish her energy, but they didn't have time for that. "Not here. Not now. We need help," Ethan said aloud, more to himself than to her. "Somewhere safe. Someone who can fix this mess." Lila tilted, her head slightly, her glowing eyes meeting his. Even without words, he could sense her curiosity and her concern. She trusted him, but she also understood how dangerous their situation was. They were two small figures adrift in a vast, unforgiving galaxy, and the odds were stacked against them. Ethan pulled up a star map on the ship's console, scanning for nearby stations or outposts. Most of the places marked on the map were either too far away or too risky. The consortium had eyes everywhere, and stopping at the wrong place could mean walking straight into a trap. But then he spotted something, a tiny blip labeled Outpost Delta 7. It wasn't much, just a remote repair station run by independent operators, but it was close enough to reach within a few hours. And if luck was on their side, maybe whoever ran the place would be willing to help. "Hold on," Ethan said, adjusting the ship's course. "We're going somewhere safer." The journey was tense. Every noise, every flicker of light outside the cockpit made Ethan's heart race. He kept glancing at the sensors, half expecting the consortium ship to reappear at any moment. Beside him, Lila remained quiet, conserving what little strength she had left. Her presence was comforting, though he felt less alone with her there, even if she couldn't speak his language. When they finally arrived at Outpost Delta 7, Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The station was small and looked worn down, its metal walls pockmarked with dents and scratches. A few other ships were docked nearby, most of them old and patched up like the Wanderer. It wasn't exactly welcoming, but it was better than nothing. As they approached the airlock, Ethan turned to Lila. "Stay close to me," he said, "and try not to glow too much, okay?" She gave him a faint smile, her glowing veins dimming slightly as if in response. Ethan nodded, gripping the handle of his utility knife tightly as he stepped out of the ship. He didn't know what or who they were walking into, and he wanted to be ready for anything. Inside the station, the air smelled faintly of oil and burnt wiring. The corridors were narrow and cluttered with tools and spare parts, and the hum of machinery echoed through the walls. At the end of the main hallway, a woman stood bent over a workbench, tinkering with a broken drone. She looked up as Ethan, and Lila entered, her sharp green eyes narrowing suspiciously. "What do you want?" she asked, wiping her hands on a grease-stained rag. Her voice was rough but not unkind, and her accent hinted at years spent traveling through space. "I'm looking for help," Ethan said quickly. "My ship's taken some damage, and my friend here is hurt. We need repairs and supplies." The woman studied them for a moment, her gaze lingering on Lila. "Friend, huh? Doesn't look human to me." "She's not," Ethan admitted, "but she's in trouble, same as me. Please, we don't have anywhere else to go." The woman sighed, setting the rag down on the table. "Name's Mia Rodriguez. I run this place. If you're looking for charity, you've come to the wrong spot. But if you've got credits or something worth trading, I might be able to help." Ethan hesitated. He didn't have much in the way of credits, but he did have a few valuable items stashed aboard the Wanderer. "I've got some tech," he said. "Old, but still functional. Enough to cover repairs and whatever else we need." Mia crossed her arms, considering. "Fine, but you better not be lying to me. The last thing I need is trouble from the consortium sniffing around here." Ethan froze. "You know about them?" "Everyone knows about them," Mia replied grimly. "They've been poking around these parts lately, looking for something or someone. If you're mixed up with them, you better tell me now." "It's complicated," Ethan said, glancing at Lila. "But we're not working with them, I promise." Mia raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. "All right, follow me." She led them deeper into the station, past rows of shelves stocked with spare parts and tools. Along the way, she explained that the outpost was mostly used by smugglers, scavengers, and others trying to stay off the grid. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe for now. Still, Mia warned them not to linger too long. The consortium had a habit of showing up where they weren't wanted. In the repair bay, Ethan unloaded the tech he brought from the Wanderer, while Mia inspected the damage to the ship. Lila stayed close, watching silently at the two humans. Worked. Occasionally, she would send a thought or image into Ethan's mind, offering suggestions or expressing gratitude. It was strange, having someone communicate with him that way. But it was also oddly comforting. As the hours passed, Ethan began to relax a little. Mia seemed trustworthy enough, and the outpost felt like a temporary haven. For the first time since finding Lila, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they might actually make it through this. But that hope was short-lived. Late that night, as Ethan sat in the repair bay reviewing the ship's systems, alarms blared suddenly. Throughout the station, Mia burst into the room, her face pale. "They're here," she said urgently. "The consortium. They found us." Ethan's stomach dropped. He turned to Lila, who was already standing, her glowing veins pulsing brightly with fear. "How? Did they find us?" he demanded. Mia shook her head. "Doesn't matter. What matters is getting out of here now." Together, they scrambled to finish the repairs, working faster than ever before. Outside, the sound of weapons fire echoed through the station as the consortium forces breached the outer defenses. Mia armed herself with a plasma rifle, her expression grim. "I'll hold them off as long as I can," she said. "Get your ship ready and get out of here." But Ethan started to protest, but Mia cut him off. "No arguments. You've got a chance to survive this. Don't waste it." With no time to argue, Ethan and Lila raced back to the Wanderer. As the engines roared to life, Ethan glanced out the viewport, watching as Mia fought fiercely against overwhelming odds. Guilt gnawed at him for leaving her behind, but he knew she was right. They had to go. The Wanderer shot out of the docking bay just as the consortium forces closed in. Behind them, the outpost erupted in flames, its once safe haven reduced to rubble. Ethan clenched the controls tightly, his knuckles white. They had escaped for now, but the cost weighed heavily on his shoulders. As the station disappeared into the distance, Lila placed a hand on Ethan's arm. Her touch was gentle, reassuring. Through their connection, she sent a single clear message. "Thank you." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. They weren't safe yet, but they were alive. And as long as they were together, they still had a fighting chance. When Lila woke up, the first thing she noticed was the hum of the ship. It wasn't a sound she recognized, nothing like the sleek, silent vessels her people use, but it was steady and alive in its own way. The second thing she noticed was Ethan sitting nearby, his head resting on his folded arms as he dozed off in the pilot's seat. His face was calm, but there were lines of worry etched into his forehead, and his clothes were smeared with dust and streaks of dry blood, not his own. Lila blinked slowly, trying to piece together what had happened. Her body felt heavy, sluggish, and her veins still pulsed faintly with the energy that kept her alive. She remembered fleeing, running from something or someone, and then collapsing in the red dust of that barren moon. After that, everything went dark. And now she was here, aboard this strange craft with a human who had somehow saved her life. She shifted slightly, wincing at the sharp pain in her side. The movement caught Ethan's attention, and he jolted awake, rubbing his eyes before turning to look at her. For a moment, they just stared at each other, two beings from completely different worlds, connected by an act of kindness, neither fully understood yet. "You're awake," Ethan said finally, his voice soft and cautious. He leaned forward, placing a hand on the edge of the makeshift bed where she lay. "How are you feeling?" Lila didn't answer right away. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, studying him. Humans were rare in the parts of space she came from, and she had only heard stories about them, fragments of tales passed down through generations. They were supposed to be unpredictable, driven by emotion rather than logic. Yet here was one who had risked himself for her without knowing anything about her. Her lips parted, and she tried to speak, but the words came out as a series of melodic tones, soft, flowing sounds that seemed more like music than language. Ethan frowned, clearly confused. He shook his head slowly, mimicking her gesture to indicate he didn't understand. Lila paused, thinking. Then, instead of speaking again, she reached out with her mind, searching for a connection. To her surprise, it worked. Not perfectly, but enough. Images flashed between them, simple ones at first. Her lying injured on the moon, Ethan finding her, carrying her back to the ship. Then more complex ideas began to form. Gratitude, fear, curiosity. Ethan's eyes widened as he felt her presence. Brush against his thoughts, gentle but insistent. "Whoa," he muttered, pulling back slightly. "What? What was that?" Lila smiled faintly, her glowing veins brightening for a brief moment. She pointed to herself, then made a sweeping motion with her hand, as if trying to encompass the vastness of space. When Ethan still looked puzzled, she closed her eyes and sent another wave of images, this time showing glimpses of her home world, a place filled with shimmering structures and beings made of pure energy. It was beautiful, but also tinged with sadness. Destruction followed quickly after the fires, the screams, the scattering of her people. Ethan swallowed hard, piecing things together. "You're not human, are you?" Lila shook her head, her expression solemn. No, she wasn't human. But she needed him to understand that she wasn't a threat either. Slowly, she placed a hand over her heart, then reached out and touched his chest lightly. The message was clear. We're alike in some ways. We both feel. We both survive. Over the next few hours, they continued their awkward attempts at communication. Ethan brought her food, though she couldn't eat it, and water, which she drank sparingly. He showed her pictures on his tablet, a photo of Earth, blue and green against the blackness of space. A snapshot of his childhood home, even a silly image of a dog chasing its tail. Each picture sparked new emotions in Lila, and she responded in kind, sharing fragments of her own memories. Through these exchanges, they started to build a fragile bridge between their two worlds. But their fragile peace didn't last long. Late that night, as Ethan monitored the ship's systems, alarms blared suddenly, startling them both. Red lights flashed across the cockpit, and the ship shuddered violently as something large approached. Ethan scrambled to the controls, his fingers flying over the console as he tried to identify the source of the disturbance. "It's a ship," he said, grimly, glancing at Lila. "And it's not friendly." On the view screen, a massive vessel loomed into view. Its design was jagged and menacing, with weapons bristling along its hull. A symbol painted on its side marked it as belonging to the Consortium, a ruthless organization known for hunting down alien artifacts and enslaving anyone who got in their way. "They found us," Ethan muttered, his jaw tightening. "Somehow, they tracked us here." Lila's eyes widened in panic. She grabbed Ethan's arm, her grip surprisingly strong despite her weakened state. Her mind raced, sending urgent warnings directly into his thoughts. These people weren't just dangerous, they were relentless. If they captured her, they would extract every ounce of knowledge and energy from her body, leaving nothing behind. "We need to go." "Now," Ethan said firmly, already powering up the engines. He glanced at Lila, his expression determined. "Hold on tight." The Wanderer shot forward, dodging blasts from the larger ship as it pursued them. Ethan's hands moved furiously over the controls, weaving through asteroids and debris fields in a desperate attempt to lose their pursuers. Behind them, the Consortium ship fired relentlessly, its weapons tearing through the void with devastating precision. Lila clung to the edges of her seat, her glowing veins flickering erratically as adrenaline coursed through her. She wanted to help, to use her abilities to shield the ship or disable their attackers, but she was too weak. All she could do was watch as Ethan fought to keep them alive. Finally, after what felt like hours, they managed to slip into a narrow canyon carved into the surface of a nearby asteroid. The Consortium ship hovered outside for a moment, scanning the area before moving on. Ethan let out a shaky breath, slumping back in his chair. "That was close," he said, his voice hoarse. He turned to look at Lila, who was pale and trembling. "Are you okay?" She nodded weakly, though her eyes betrayed her fear. They both knew this wasn't over. The Consortium wouldn't give up easily, and sooner or later they'd find him again. But for now, they were safe, or as safe as they could be in the endless expanse of space. As the Wanderer drifted silently through the shadows of the asteroid, Ethan and Lila shared a quiet moment of understanding. They were bound together now, united by survival and trust. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together,